You ready to do this, Steve?
Let's do it, Spence. Punch it, Chewie.
Welcome, super friends, to the Fortress of Nerditude podcast, safe place to talk about all things in nerd and pop culture. I'm Spencer Stapleton, and my co-pilot, as always, is Steve Madura.
Malakalaki Maka is a wise way to say Merry Christmas to you.
We're two best friends that, despite being fathers and husbands, we refuse to grow up. Thank you for joining us. This is episode number 33. We release every Thursday morning on iTunes, Google Music, and Stitcher. Steve, we're 33. That basically means we're now Scottie Pippen, yo.
Right on. Playing second fiddle always. I actually have a Scottie Pippen card, a Fleer 91 card, in my office, pinned up on my board.
You pinned it?
No, well, I mean, the pin is not holding, like, it's not through the, yes, it's holding it up, but it's not through it. It's like...
I was like, that's worth some money, and you're going to deface it?
Yeah, some guy that we had to let go, unfortunately, gave it to me before he left, which was very nice of him, so...
Wow. Well,
what do you think that's worth?
Nice.
Will you Google that for me? 91 Fleer Scottie Pippen card. What's that worth?
Well, I will Google that for you while you tell me how your week is, my friend.
All right. So I would say that it's Christmas in July, a little bit of Malakalikimaha. The week has been good. We had a good weekend here in Chicago. There was nice weather. Went down and visited some friends. Shout out Dean Truhoff. What's up? And had a barbecue with he and his family. And it's just a cool thing to just stand around a barbecue with your buddies and just like talk while you're flipping burgers and frying fries. There's something manly about the meat. I don't know what it is.
Yes, there is something manly about the meat.
Just wanted to set that one up for you. Anyway, we did that on the weekend.
I appreciate that.
and this week we are looking to go to New York because my wife was in a pageant when she was younger called the Hilkmore pageant. So we're headed out to New York. Going to hit Niagara Falls and possibly Cedar Point in Ohio on our trip. And
what up?
So looking forward to it. But the week has just overall been good. And we, one thing my wife has been doing, I don't know if I've talked about this before, but she has been listening to this book, and I don't know the name of the book, but it's basically like this minimalistic life where you should only keep the things that bring you joy. That's kind of the premise of the book. And you should go through everything, every piece of clothing, every game, every toy your kids have, and they should be able to say, yes, I like this, it brings me joy, or no, it doesn't, and no more are the days of like, no, I'll keep it when I later, or I'll use this later, or whatever. Like, if you don't use it, you don't need it, get rid of it. And so we've been through like this huge purging thing of like getting rid of things. It's been kind of awesome.
Steve, though, that's good advice, I think, for a lot of things in life. But when it comes to collectibles, that's horrible advice. And I tell you why. Your 91 Fleer Scottie Pippen card right now is going for about $10 on eBay.
Is it really?
So, yeah, you hold on to that thing. If it's in like really good condition, like mintish condition, some of them are saying like, much higher for like rare mint condition, but if it's in like really good condition, it's like $10.
What the heck? Hot
so,
dang.
Hold on to that thing another, couple of decades, and it'll be much harder to find, and that thing may be worth $20.
Ooh, $20.
Now, of course, like if you remember from our card collecting days as youth, if you had his like rookie card from his rookie year, 91 obviously wasn't his rookie year.
Right.
But if you had his rookie year, like in rare mint condition, that thing would be worth a ton more money.
Really?
But just
saying,
saying,
did I tell you
91
the time
Fleer,
that I met
$10.
Scottie Pippen?
No.
Well,
Was it in bankruptcy
sit back
court?
And relax. Actually, it kind of almost was. So he actually came to my office. I used to work for a company called Sheldon Good and Company. We would sell high-end homes for people like R. Kelly, Jack Welch, ex-CEO of GE. And so one day, we get this email, this corporate email that says, "Hey, we're going to have somebody come into the office. Please, try to act try to act respectful.
Right, yeah,
and
yeah.
kind of a general email.
Which gives you the idea like, hey, this is someone well known that we're all going to recognize.
Exactly. So literally, like Scottie Pippen like comes into my office with my boss at the time, and you never really get the sense like of how big someone really is. I mean, you see him on the court, and you expect like 6'5" or 6'6" or 6'7", or however tall he was, But he comes in and literally, and I don't mean to be grotesque, but I was looking at his crotch. I mean, I'm not kidding. Like I stood up and I was like almost looking like at his maybe crotch, maybe upper belt buckle. I don't know, but it was like that.
You were looking at his crotch. I know you.
You jerk. No, but seriously, I'm like, what? This man is humongous. He had to duck under the door, and we have. I mean, this is a office Class A skyscraper downtown Chicago, and he's like ducking through the doors. It's crazy. So,
wow.
He was a nice guy, though. He was a nice guy. He was broke, though. He had gone to the Rockets,
right.
as you recall. Didn't do well there, didn't stay there long, and he had to sell his house there. And he had made some bad decisions because he let somebody else manage his money, which is never a good thing. And so he was actually coming to us because he was in a bit of a pinch.
I know the whole sad tale of Scottie Pippen, and it breaks my heart to know like what he went through. And some of the choices he made, but happily, like he's doing much better now. So
is he?
Anyway,
okay.
Yes.
Well, love Scotty. So anyway, that was that, and my brush with fame and crotch
and Scottie Pippen's crotch.
I didn't brush up against it. It was just this is getting weird now. This did not happen.
Says you. I got a podcast that says otherwise.
This isn't being recorded, is it?
No, of course not. Let's start over.
This is just a test, a very long mic check.
Yes. Good. So you're getting ready to go out of town and gonna make your way over to New York and maybe Cedar Point and Niagara Falls and all the rest.
Yeah. Have you ever been to New York? You ever seen the falls? You ever seen?
I have. A few years, maybe about a year before Charlie was born, Brita and I went out to visit my mom, who lives in and around the Philadelphia area, and we flew into New York. And I think LaGuardia is where we flew into. Anyway, we did New York.
Third world country, yeah.
Right, I know, it's horrible. We flew in there and did New York City for the weekend, and then we drove to Philly, and then we drove from there, and we did Niagara Falls and kind of that whole area, and we ended up driving back down to Indiana to visit family. So,
nice.
Yeah, I've been back that area. It's beautiful. You're going this week. It's going to be hot, muggy, and a lot of mosquitoes, but you'll have fun.
It's amazing though how rural New York is, right? You get out of New York City, it is crazy rural, above ground pools and rusty trucks and stuff. I'm like, what the heck?
Yep.
A little amazed. But anyway, so that week was good. How was your week, man? What have you been up to? You've been...
So I was lone man in the wilderness this last week.
I'm surprised you're alive,
Reading
actually.
the boys. Well, there was touch and go for a couple moments there. Let's see, they were gone, which, it was sad they weren't here, but I kept myself busy. I did the 4th of July by myself. I stayed pretty much indoors because it was blistering hot. I actually watched fireworks out of our back window. I didn't even go outside onto the porch. It was just hot, and I was like, I can see it. I love the 4th of July. I love celebrating the 4th of July, but I'm by myself, and just it was what it was. But let's see, I did that. And then, of course, Brita and the boys got home late Saturday night. So it's really good having them back in the house and seeing the boys and Brita. So that's, all's happy there. I went and saw Spider-Man Homecoming this weekend.
Oh,
I went on Thursday night, on opening night. It is amazing. It's excellent. I think it's probably going to be my favorite Spider-Man movie. Wow. It really is. Wow. It was really, really good. I'm dying to talk about this with you.
Any surprises that you can talk about in the podcast without spoiling anything?
No,
anything that you were...
no, I can't. And I wish I could, because it's just opening weekend, just barely happened. I mean, it's not even, by the time this podcast goes out, it'll be a week since the movie's been out. So I really don't want to say anything because it will give away stuff, and I want people to have a chance to see it before we kind of dive into it and talk about it. I did see Split. I don't know if I told you about that, but I did see Split.
Yeah.
Okay. Did that. And then, of course, on Sunday was my brother's birthday. He turned 36. So happy birthday, Josh.
Happy birthday, you bum.
And I decided to invite him and his family and kids and all over. And I made authentic deep dish Chicago stuffed pizza. And
wow. Don't you have to do like a special pan for that or something?
I have 2 of them.
I guess that answers that question.
Yeah, so I made my own dough. I made my own sauce, ingredients. I didn't make my own cheese. I bought store-bought mozzarella.
You didn't churn your own cheese from a cow that you bought from an old woman in the marketplace?
I got the cow and the cheese is going, but it takes a while. Yeah.
Right.
No, so anyway, we made homemade pizzas, and I made one big large pizza that was half pepperoni and black olive and half Canadian bacon and pineapple. And then the big deep dish Chicago stuffed pizza was sausage, pepperoni, and black olive.
How did it turn out?
Oh, it was amazing, dude. It was awesome.
Wow.
Because I did it the way like real true Chicago pizzas. Like there's cornmeal in the dough, and then you actually fold butter into it, so it gets at that buttery flake, which you don't get that in any other pizza crust outside of Chicago deep dish pizza. And it was crunchy and good, and just had that perfect like kind of brittleness when you bite into that buttery flake. It was excellent.
Did it taste at all like Giordano's?
I mean, I'm not going to be opening up a pizza place and trying to give the entire Giordano's Corporation a run for their money, but in a side-by-side taste test, it would pass as a very, very good knockoff.
That's awesome, man. I am hungry and impressed, but mostly hungry.
So anyway, I did that, and then last thing I wanted to say, and this really isn't something that happened to me, but I don't know if I've told you, but my brother Josh and his son, which he's going by the name Cool Knight on YouTube, his oldest boy, they're doing a YouTube video series called Raising a Gamer. And it's basically they play a video game and they kind of talk about it, and they'll show footage of it. And it's basically kind of, what it's like to play video games with your son and show him kind of the ropes and some of the old games and kind of give him a feel for some of the history of video games and where it's been and stuff that's current. And so if you listen to this show and Mr. Nodal Pats, and you want to go on YouTube. It's called Raising a Gamer. Subscribe. That you can follow them on Twitter, which I believe is at Raising a Gamer. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun. I know that they've got a whole bunch of stuff recorded and a whole bunch of stuff planning to record, and they're going to release, I think, a video every other week, I believe.
That is awesome. Now, so you said they're both going to do new games and old games, so they'll do some nostalgia.
They're going to mix stuff up. They're going to do some old, some new. They're going to vary kind of the style of games. Like they may play a sports game in one video, and then the next game may be like an action game, like action adventure, and the next one may be a shooter, and then they may go to like a puzzle game. They may jump over to a platformer. So like a whole different variety of things. And they're going to play old games like stuff on the Nintendo and the Sega Genesis and the SNES and 64 and PlayStation.
That sounds great, man. That's
So we're definitely a big supporter of our friends and our family, and this is something that I know Josh has been talking about doing for a while now, and I've had a chance to kind of help be a sounding board for him to bounce some ideas off of. And so I'm really excited to see this. I think it's a really cool idea, because I think so many times you see people like professionals who do like gaming videos, or, professionals who do video game podcasts. I mean, we do this podcast where we talk about like nerd and pop culture, but I mean, the idea of like raising your son or raising your daughter or raising your children on the things that you were raised on, it's kind of like that generational, like, nostalgia and like passing of the torch.
Yeah.
And I don't know that you see a lot of that on YouTube. So it's a cool idea, and I know it's going to do well, and I'm looking forward to all the success that it has.
Yeah, well, and also being able to do something with your kid that can be kind of a little time capsule of your time together. That's as we've talked about, Spence, I think offline, not really during the podcast, but I've got older sons, and they know that I do this podcast. Their friends know that I do this podcast, and all the time they're like, "Dad, when can we get on it? We want to review a movie. We want to, and of course, you involve them in some way. Have Charlie come on and talk about some movie. Give us a 3-minute little whatever.
Oh, he could tell you about Lego Batman because he's all up in that right now.
my kids the same way. They watch we want to review, and I'm like, done and done. A little bit late to the game, children.
You know what, Steve? Maybe that's something we do as a little side podcast every now and again. We'll just record a little bonus mini episode where we get the kids on and they talk about a movie or something. That might be kind of a fun thing.
They could talk about it amongst themselves. We wouldn't even have to do anything. Just intro the thing and then just let them go. It'd be so funny.
Yeah, for a few minutes at least.
Until the vulgarity starts.
Then the name calling and the race baiting. No, our kids would never do that. They would never. My kids would be like, "Hey, I see you. That's cool. What are you doing? My name is Charlie. I'm over here." And it's like, buddy, you're supposed to talk about a movie. Oh yeah, so I can see you. It's like, all right, never mind.
Oh, that's awesome.
It would be 10 minutes of that.
I'd pay to see it. So we'll have to do that. So look for that in the future. We'll put some.
We'll arrange that. That'd be a fun little thing to do.
Put some preteens on the podcast.
Speaking of arranging things, we're sadly and sorely overdue for a movie club. And I know this month with vacations and whatnot been a little crazy. But next week we're going to do a movie club. Brita's going to come back and join us, and we're going to throw it back, and we're going to go a little old school.
Yep.
We're going to go with Christopher Nolan's Inception.
Ooh, classic. That was a groundbreaker. Loved it.
Yeah. So we figure let's do a podcast within a podcast within a podcast and talk about Inception next week.
Oh, that's awesome. And,
so just a little preview. If you haven't seen it in a while and you want a refresher, go see it. But if you don't, that's fine because we will be your refresher.
That's right. And if you haven't seen it, period, then where have you been? So, all right.
Right? Seriously.
That's cool. Okay. Well, why don't we get to your favorite part of the show and mine, a little Rebel Intelligence. What do you say?
Let's do it, man. I always have to let you know, many Bothans died to bring us this information.
Rest in peace, you Bothans.
Okay, Steve. So, Rebel Intelligence. Let's jump right into this. I want to start with the Spider-Man Homecoming numbers because I think that's appropriate since I told you I just saw it. It's opening weekend.
Yep.
Spider-Man Homecoming. I know that the studio was kind of hedging their bets, saying they thought they were going to have an $80 million opening, and some experts were saying they thought it could be anywhere from 80 to maybe on the high side, 110 million. Well, the numbers for the opening weekend came out. Spider-Man Homecoming brought in $117 million. It broke the expectations of the experts. It way surpassed the expectations of the studio. I think we've got a bona fide Spider-Man hit on our hands.
There you go. Welcome home, Spidey. Welcome home. I wonder why they were hedging their bets so much with, maybe because Wonder Woman just came out, and maybe they were, didn't want to look bad if things went awry, or you think it had anything to do with that?
Maybe, but it's also probably the idea that the last Spider-Man movie that Sony put out was The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and that movie just kind of fell flat and didn't do so well. So they're probably just hedging their bets, knowing that, past track record of some of the ones they put out have been a little up and down. But hey, you've got Marvel involved now, and you got the man Kevin Feige's involved. So, you got Robert Downey Jr. who's in the movie. You're not gonna you're not going to go wrong. So
now the numbers that I saw said that this summer looks like it was third behind. So it passed Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman opened at 103 million, and
Right.
it's so far behind Beauty and the Beast, which was 174 million, and Guardians of the Galaxy 2 at 146 million. So
right, for their opening weekend,
for their opening weekend, right. So
Yeah, I think it's going to be one of the bigger money makers this year. I mean, and definitely this summer season, because I think like a movie like Beauty and the Beast probably had a really big opening weekend, and then probably it fell off pretty strong in its second or third week is my guess. I don't have the numbers in front of me. That's my guess.
Yeah.
Guardians of the Galaxy 2 obviously was going to hold on and be pretty strong for a few weekends. I think Spider-Man's going to stay strong for a couple weekends in a row, and then it'll start kind of tapering off. But I think it's going to be a lot of good word of mouth. It got a 94% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes, so the critics love it and the fans are loving it. And so I think that's going to help fuel a big run for this movie. And I think it's going to make a lot of money.
Well, there we go. Well, it's always good to have some good news, some good news.
Yeah,
I like that.
I agree.
So on to the bad news. True Blood actor Nelson Ellis, I believe is how you say it.
Right.
39, dies from complications due to heart failure. And I was not a True Blood fan, had never watched the show, but many said that he was just a good person and a true talent, and he will be missed. So wanted to slow this one down for you a little bit. So it's never a good thing, but seems to be a theme with our Rebel Intelligence that there has to be an obituary to round out the week. So
yeah, sad to hear. Our thoughts and prayers obviously go out to family and friends.
Absolutely.
But let's bounce back, man. Down story. Donald Logue, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. Obviously, an actor you'd recognize, has been in just a ton of stuff.
Yep.
His child, his daughter, had gone missing for like 2 weeks, and he'd been all over social media, and his ex-wife was all over social media, and they were getting the FBI involved, and what's his name, Matt Walsh,
John Walsh.
America's
Most
Walsh.
Wanted. Yeah.
Right. And basically like trying to get everyone involved because their child had gone missing, and they suspected that the child, was with probably friends and, people run the same social circles. But finally, they were reunited with the daughter. And so they just kind of sent out a message that says, we're good. We're all good right now. But it was one of those like messages, like when they were pleading, for her to come home. It's like, we don't care what's going on. There's no judgment, just come home to us. We love you, that sort of thing. And man, you hear that and it's like, you understand, at least I understand as a father, like that's an impassioned plea from a father.
Yeah.
It just says like, I just love you. And it doesn't matter what's going on. We can get through anything. We can ignore just please come home. Please be safe.
Yeah.
Let us know that you're okay, sort of thing. And it turned out really good in the end. And so that's a really like happy story. I'm glad that worked out.
It's interesting because I think I've talked about it before, but a lot of times I'll just have something on my phone playing in the background while I'm doing whatever, and as YouTube does, it kind of switches to this, that, whatever's next in the queue, and sometimes it just randomly pulls things. And probably a week or two now, I was doing dishes or something, and I'd listened to a few comedians, and then I got into a few TED Talks actually.
Yeah.
And one of the TED Talks was by Elizabeth Smart, and I listened to the whole thing, and it was harrowing as a father of 2 daughters to hear just what happened. And I remember vividly, being at BYU at the time in Utah, and obviously, she being a member of our church, it was a kind of front and center. Not only was it national news, but it was very, local news as well. I remember BYU, all of the computer screens and all the computer labs had her picture on it and said, have you seen this girl and whatnot. And And I remember specifically, and I'm ashamed to say it, but I was like, oh, she's gone. You know, it's been what was it, like 5-6 months?
It was like 9 months. I think.
Yeah, it was like 9.
Yeah.
I'm like, there's no way. I mean, I had totally lost all hope. But you think like most of them end that way, right? Most of them end that way.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, right? But to see something like this with Donald Lowe's or with Elizabeth Smart, to see a good ending to that is just, it really is a miracle to see a child safely return home, and I'm sure their parents' hearts, at the verge of breaking. So.
Yeah,
good to have some good news. I've got one that I want to talk about that I thought was kind of funny, and so Jeremy Renner, who plays Hawkeye in the Avengers movies, he's currently filming a movie called Tag, and this movie stars he and a few other cast members. I'm not sure who else. I think there was Ed Helms is in it. Yeah. Well, who? What?
IMDb.
Yeah. No. Hollywood deadline. But anyway, no. Ed Helms, Jake Johnson, Hannibal, somebody. Anyway, so he had injured himself on the set of the movie. I guess he was doing some kind of production shoot and fractured his right arm and injured his left wrist on set. And everyone was worried that injuries suffered during this might affect the filming of the Avengers: Infinity War, which is starting soon, I think.
Right. Yeah, they've started filming. Yep.
But what's funny about this is it talks about the movie that he's filming. So Tag is a true story of a group of friends that played an epic game of tag for 30 years. It was a no-holds-barred 30-year game of tag that I assume traversed continents and states and state lines and all the rest. And I was just intrigued by just that, that idea, right? Like, can you imagine that? Suddenly, like, you get off a plane and somebody just runs like, you're it! You're like, what the freak? Where did that come from? I just flew into, Tanzania.
I would also assume that, like, this happened while he was doing like one of his own stunts, because I think it was during the filming of the first Avengers movie, like he broke his back filming a stunt or something, as I recall, really? Or maybe he's like slipped a disc or something. Like I don't remember like all the salient details, but I know he got hurt pretty bad, and you can actually see like that moment on film. They didn't take it out. They didn't take it out because he had a very pained look on his face.
Can you think of anything worse than breaking your back?
Yes. Would you like details?
Maybe Scottie Pippen.
That's what I was going to say. Scottie Pippen's crotch in your face in your office. I promise that is not the title of this show.
What's going to be the media this week? But no, like, I just imagine that. Oh my gosh, breaking your back.
That would hurt.
I had a friend who was a little bit older than I am, but great guy, tall guy, big guy, and he broke his femur doing this, that, or the other, which I heard as a male is one of the worst pains there is. Right? Like 10 is probably childbearing and whatnot, but like right below that is like got to be like breaking your femur. And so he broke his femur. And he's on bed rest, and somebody's coming over, like a yardman or something like that, to fix something or do something. So he goes out to show him what to do and where to go, and he slips, and he lands on a rock on the hip that they just replaced, and he shattered. Oh! I just threw up my mouth just then. Yeah, so he had to like do the whole thing all over again. I'm just like, just shoot me. Just take me to the glue factory.
Right. Take me out back and finish me off. Daddy, where's old Yeller?
Tweet, 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 tweet. Bambi.
Oh, wow.
Anyway. So this is taking a dark turn.
Right? Speaking of dark, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Dark, is actually coming back to theaters for its 40th anniversary. It's going to start like the week of September 1st. It's going to run for a week. So you can look and find a theater near you and watch Close Encounters of the Third Kind in the theater. I've seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind many, 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 many times. It was one of my dad's favorites. But I think this is something like, even though I've seen the movie a bunch, it would be really a lot of fun to see this on the big screen.
Yeah.
Especially at the very end. Bum, 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 bum. That would be amazing to have like in a big full theater sound. So I think I'm going to go do that.
That would just be kind of a cool throwback, right? To see some of these movies that you saw maybe as a child, like a baby, you don't even remember it, or your parents saw it and you weren't even born yet, and like to see that in the theater, that would be a cool experience.
Yeah, I agree.
I like it. What do I got for you? So this is one that I know we both kind of chuckled at as we read this and talked about it prior to the podcast. But this is one where I don't know what side you're on, but a battle.
I know what you're going to talk about, and I'm excited to talk about it.
So the age-old, long fought battle that stretches beyond galaxies is the Star Wars versus Star Trek. Turning brother against brother, wife against child, tearing lifelong friendships apart. And in one case, it nearly turned lethal. A guy by the name of Jerome Wyatt, 23, was arrested last week in Oklahoma after a heated debate about Star Wars and Star Trek turned into a real-life assault. Spence, you want to take the rest of this?
Yeah, so these two, like, uber super friends of ours, apparently.
Right? They're listening to this podcast, guaranteed.
They basically, it was a conversation, and eventually it got into this whole, who is better? And it was Spock versus Yoda. And eventually it became a shoving match, and then one guy got shoved to the ground, and then it was back and forth, and then White, jumped on him and wrapped his arms around the guy's neck and started choking the other man. And then, of course, this Bradley Burke, the friend or whatever that was involved, whipped out a pocket knife so that White ended up letting go of him. And so this young gentleman, Mr. White, was arrested for assault and battery, and as well as some other unrelated charges, which I'm going to guess is probably drug paraphernalia.
Sexual assault with a...
Anyway, it's one of these stories that it's I understand having maybe a heated, nerd pop culture debate, but shoving and then a rear naked choke and having to whip out a pocket knife. I mean, let's be honest. We know what started the Civil War. It was not an issue of slavery or an issue of economics. No. General Lee and President Lincoln were having a discussion about
Spock is the shiznit.
Spock and Yoda, and which one's the better one. And that's how we got the Civil War, ladies and gentlemen.
I can only imagine though that while White's friend is reaching for his pocket knife, it's like some Swiss Army knife. So instead of pulling out the blade, he pulls out the corkscrew or the magnifying glass. He's like, "What the crap is this gonna do for me?"
The funny thing is,
pulls out the nail file.
If you're having this conversation and if you're going to get into a fight over which is better, Star Trek or Star Wars, wouldn't you argue about Captain Kirk versus Luke Skywalker? But no, it's Yoda and Spock. What? Right? The conversation was who is more wise? Oh, let's talk about who's going to impart the best wisdom. I'm going to fight you for it.
but Spence, that these guys weren't true nerds, or else, akin to last week's Rebel Intelligence, they would have grabbed the long sword off the wall and been like, yeah, and run him through.
Right?
Spock! And then he dies.
I have always been and shall be your friend. Did he just quote Wrath of Khan as he died?
He got the last laugh.
Anyway, that's the last thing I've got in Rebel Intelligence.
That's done for me too.
How
can you better that?
I don't think it's possible, my friend. I just don't think it's possible.
Who do you like? I mean, literally, Spock or Yoda?
Gosh, I don't know, but I'm ready to fight you. Yeah, exactly. Oh man, that's just too good. It's too good.
Idiots.
Steve, last week we had a wonderful star-spangled conversation.
It was.
We talked about our favorite patriotic movies, and we went to social media and we asked you, our super friends, and the listeners of the podcast to let us know who are your favorite, or what are your favorite patriotic movies. And we got a whole bunch of responses, and so we're going to try to get through a few of these here rather quickly.
Awesome.
Let's start over at the old Twitter. The Geeky Nerd at dspin67 says, my top movies: Air Force One, Delta Force, Stripes, The Alamo, Red Dawn, Black Hawk Down.
Red Dawn. Patrick Swayze drinks deer blood. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, pretty
Harrison
America.
Ford, Air Force One. Give me back my plane. That's a pretty good line.
Right.
Pretty good line.
Let's jump over to Facebook. So we'll start with Chase Van Orden. It says, The Patriot is always a must-watch for me every Independence Day. My wife and I also really enjoy 1776, the musical, starring Boy Meets World's Mr. Feeney.
Really?
Yes.
If only it would have been Topanga. She was
right?
hot.
I mean, back in the day when I was like a teenager, I look at her now like, no.
Time
what
is
was
not
I thinking?
kind.
Right. Actually, I mean, for an adult, she's still fine. But I'm saying it's like, anyway, never mind. This
has gone about 30 seconds too long.
Back on Facebook here. Eric Salway, our good old friend, says, my go-to Yay America movies are Independence Day and Air Force One. Both have some cheesy one-liners in them, but can't help but make you feel all warm and fuzzy inside. As far as just a movie about freedom in general, I love Braveheart and want to go fight some Englishmen every time I see it.
That is actually a great anti-American movie, because really like those... Well, no, I guess we hated the English too. Yeah, that's true.
Now, I did say patriotic movie.
That's true.
I did not necessarily say like USA patriotic movie, even though we're deeply patriotic about the USA because that's where we live. Like if our buddy Sean Capri had wrote in about, some Canadian Mountie that was a movie about a boot. I would have read that response, but sadly,
or Aju's Nodelpats about Sweden or Norway, wherever he's from.
Ice Maiden, the Ice Maiden, the superhero. Yeah. No,
so going back to Eric, like I totally agree with him. Actually, every time I watch that, and like Mel Gibson, like you see the strain in his neck, and he's like, as he's getting like stretched and like be-gutted. That is a freaking awesome scene. I love that movie.
Is be-gutted a word?
Let's go on.
Okay. Well, let's move along. We'll move along.
A boot.
Eric Gifford, my brother-in-law, says maybe a less remembered film is Glory, starring Denzel Washington, Morgan Freeman, and Matthew Broderick.
I like him already.
It's a more complicated time in American history, but it ranks high for its characters' willingness to make sacrifice for the better of the nation. And then he goes on to say, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington is pure, innocent patriotism, and Frank Capra and Jimmy Stewart are about as classic American as apple pie. And
wow.
I agree. I love Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. It is one of my favorite all-time movies.
Wait, did he say American Pie or is apple pie?
As classic American as apple pie.
Okay, because American Pie is not patriotic at all.
Well... No, probably not. Moving on, Joshua Brigham, second on Glory, and I can always watch some Black Hawk Down. End scene where he is talking to caskets being shipped home, and then a little sad cry emoji face. So
that sad cry emoji face gets me every time.
Me too. Here's our last one on Facebook. Caleb Albers. My personal favorite has to be Captain America, The First Avenger, which I watched this week, by the way. Seeing Cap bust through that door alongside the Howling Commandos, serving up some good old-fashioned independence made me proud to be an American. Anytime I see that shield, I feel an urge to wave Old Glory. I also really enjoyed Lone Survivor and American Sniper, though they were super hard for me to watch. I really got a sense of American pride that I've only ever felt from the last day Beast Week and graduation from the Air Force boot camp. I may not bleed blue Air Force through and through airman, but I'm a die-hard American. I bleed red, white, and blue USA. To Peter this week, We're Americans first, and in the spirit of America, I won't give you too hard of a time. I'm just going to blow some crap up. America.
Good man. Good man. That's so well. Caleb Albers, thank you for serving our country, my friend.
Absolutely. We appreciate your willingness to do so.
God bless you.
And let's go over to email. Peter Christensen.
Cheers.
Dear nerds, a mighty salute to your 4th of July episode and its stirring music. I agree with all of your choices for patriotic movies and add one of my own. It gets a lot of grief and it's not perfect, but I really enjoyed the movie Pearl Harbor. Token Affleck reference accomplished. The battle scenes are intense and realistic. The moving scenes, FDR standing, Doolittle's speeches, volunteers stepping forward, triage, cutting weight for early takeoff are powerful. And it's a good training wheels history lesson. You have to overlook the love triangle and remember that while there was no single super soldier that did everything Affleck does, everything that happens to him happened to some real American soldier or pilot. Give it a chance. Thanks again, Peter Christensen.
Well said, Peter.
Which is true. Like, I really do like that movie on the merit of everything that really did kind of happen, minus the love triangle, really did happen to some soldier. And I did appreciate that they did that in that movie. So.
Yeah, and when you can go to... Have you been to Hawaii, Spence?
Not yet. We're going to go for our 10-year anniversary. At least that's the plan.
Yeah, I mean, when you go to Pearl Harbor on Oahu and literally see, the oil still leaking from the ship, I mean, it is powerful. It is sacred, and So that movie actually, which I always thought could be 2 movies. They could have done 2 movies out of that. It
sure.
Seems very compartmentalized, but no, it actually is cinematically is actually a really beautiful movie to watch.
Yeah,
so
it is.
Yeah. Well done.
We appreciate all of your input, super friends. We are so glad that you felt patriotic and wanted to share your patriotic movies with us. We once again will always reach out on social media to interact, and you can follow us at Twitter at Fort of Nerd, or you can get us on Facebook, facebook.com/FortofNerd, or you can reach us by email, fortofnerd@gmail.com. Steve, our super friends have been doing a very good job helping us find more friends that will one day become super friends. How can our current super friends help us along a little bit more?
They can rate us on iTunes, so the Fortress of Nerditude isn't as hard to find as Scotty... No, I'm not even going to do it. Just rate us on iTunes.
There you go. Just rate us on iTunes. It helps. Somehow. There's a mathematical equation... But it does help.
2 plus 3 minus the 1, carry the decimal. I don't even know. But yeah,
something
it does. So rate us. Yeah, tell us what you think, and good, bad, or ugly. Tell us what you think. We'd love to hear it, and we'll take your comments and not change at all. So there you go.
Well, good. So Steve, I was going to ask you a question. Have you watched any of the kind of mini series that CNN has been doing over the last few years, where they did the 60s, and then they did one on the 70s and one on the 80s. Have you seen any of those?
I have not.
So they're on Netflix right now. You can catch the 60s, 70s, and 80s on Netflix. But CNN basically is doing this thing where they're kind of going back and they're creating a mini-series with somewhere between 8 to 10 episodes in each one, where they talk about a generation.
Yeah.
They talk about the 60s, they talk about the 70s, they talk about the 80s. So obviously they're going to now start doing the 90s. And I believe the first one just aired just last night. I haven't seen it yet because I've watched these on Netflix, been behind. So I thought it might be kind of a fun idea to do, since this kind of fits into nerd and pop culture, let's take a flashback, my friend. Let's go back to the generation that defines, or the decade that defines our generation, Generation X. And let's talk a little bit about what we think could show up in the CNN 90s miniseries that's going to show up. So,
okay,
this is what I think.
Right.
This is what I think we should do, and because I've got a little list going here, and just a few things. Put down some notes. So let's go back. So try to go back in time. Remember, this is for us junior high, high school, and into the college years, right?
Yeah.
So this is the 90s. So since you haven't seen this, I'll kind of give you a breakdown. Like in the 60s, 70s, and 80s ones, they'll do an episode like where one episode will be kind of like on the political issues of the day or the political news stories. They'll have one that'll be like on music. They'll have one that'll be like on like TV or movies. They'll have one on, whatever is kind of like big. So like during the 80s, like they had a whole episode on like on President Reagan and like kind of the, what was going on and kind of the revolution, the Reagan Revolution is what they called it. They did a whole episode on like TV coming of age in the 80s. And they talked about all the influences of TV and all the big TV shows and like how that kind of changed things. So I'm kind of guessing that they're going to do something similar for the 90s. So I thought that there's like 5 categories and we can just kind of toss it out and we can kind of take some guesses as to what we think. So,
okay.
Let's start here. In the 90s, what do you think were some of the top news stories? Some of the things that probably would get featured on this documentary about the 90s?
I would have to say one of the things would probably be two things. One would be the O.J. Simpson
Sure,
trial.
Right?
Yeah,
I mean, that was
the white Bronco.
Huge.
I mean, I literally remember, as our parents probably do when JFK was assassinated, I literally remember where I was, who I was with, what I was doing when we were listening to, in Ron John's, like, chemistry class.
Right.
Robin Gores was there and some other people were there when we heard the verdict. And,
right. Yep.
All pandemonium broke loose. But yeah, so that would be one.
Okay.
And
I agree with you. I think that I definitely think that makes it onto the. I mean, the documentary
forever, right? That thing went on and then the trial went on forever.
If the glove don't fit, you must acquit.
You must acquit, Johnny Cochran. And then the other thing I would say was probably like the Monica Lewinsky and Bill Clinton, the scandal,
the sex scandal. Yep,
the sex scandal.
That was huge, right? Because I mean, it was the president of the United States and an intern, and he's married, obviously, and then you found out there was like all these other women that were coming forward, and sometimes like when women come forward to do this, there's the tendency to say, okay, how deep does this rabbit hole go? Or some, people question, whether or not these women are just coming forth because they're looking for money.
Right.
I had no problem believing that President Clinton was involved with these women. I mean,
he was like the first sexy saxophone man. He would go on like the Tonight Show. Well, he seduced them with his saxophone.
Well, it's funny that you brought that up because his like campaign in like 1991 for the 92 election, like that was like a big thing. Like he was youthful. He was a baby boomer that was going to be the first baby boomer to be in the White House. And he played the saxophone and like he was appealing to the youth of that generation. So
right.
I definitely think that would show up. Some other news stories I thought that maybe would show up. Like what about like the LA riots after like the Rodney King verdict?
Oh yeah. Oh, Rodney.
Like
yes.
that would probably show up. Maybe the World Trade Center bombing in 1994. Remember that where they had the
with the fertilizer and
and of course then that made me also think of the Oklahoma City bombing, right, where the federal building,
Texas, happen as well in the 90s.
Yeah,
with John Koresh, I think his name
David Koresh and the Branch Davidians.
That's right, the Branch Davidians.
Yeah.
Oh,
so that I would imagine
they're
would
a sect
show
of
up.
Presbyterians. I'm just kidding.
Of course, like you had the first Gulf War, which was just called the Gulf War at the time, right?
Storm and Norman.
Yep. Operation
Norman
Desert
Schwarzkopf.
Storm.
Yep.
Of course, the fall of the Soviet Union on December 25th, 1991, when it was Christmas Day and basically the Soviet Union just disbanded and like it fell apart. Like, because in the very end of the 80s one, obviously they were talking about Reagan and, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And like, it was like November of 1989 that the Berlin Wall fell. And then it wasn't till
that's crazy.
Like, Christmas of 91 that the Soviet Union fell apart. And it was in, I think, 1990 that Germany reunified after like 45 years. Like, it just seemed like literally between like November of 89 to like Christmas of 91, like the Cold War just disappeared. And like that happened when we were in junior high. I mean, we grew up in that era where we talked about the Cold War and, the duck and cover and like what to do in the case of an atomic bomb, drops on your school. You hide under the desk. Well, not that was going to do anything. Right? But like,
that's the best we got.
The Cold War ended. I think, Princess Diana dying.
Oh, I remember where I was with that as well. I was in Wisconsin Dells at my Aunt Kate's. Yeah.
Yeah. What about Dolly the sheep? You remember that?
Oh, the
sheep,
clone? They cloned
the
her?
first genetically cloned mammal?
Yes.
Like I think that's going to be big.
Was that also the same time when they put the ear on the back of that rat? Or was that more recently?
Yeah, no, I think that was around the same time.
Around the same time.
I remember talking about it in biology class.
Ear on the back of a rat? Couldn't you think of anything else like funnier than that? No, it's pretty funny.
Yeah. So
that's interesting.
So, I mean, definitely I think some top news stories that could make it their way to this new 90s CNN documentary. Okay.
Oh, definitely.
Music. What do you think are going to be some top music stories from the 90s?
Nirvana. Kurt Cobain.
Kurt Cobain's death, right?
Yep.
I mean,
absolutely. Number one.
So I think you're going to definitely hear about the rise of grunge music and the Seattle music scene because that changed rock and roll. I mean, that changed like the kind of the glam metal of the 80s was, obviously just took a serious like turn to the left and grunge music from Seattle. But I mean, Kurt Cobain's suicide and what that did to the industry and what it did to those groups and kind of the fallout. Yeah. What else do you think comes out of the 90s for music stories?
I'm trying to think of just general music. I'm thinking like, I don't know why, but like just DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. And not that it's a news story or anything, but that's just like Will Smith with his hat backwards, like dun, 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 dun. I pulled up to a house about 7 or 8. I said, "Go home, smell you later."
Well, that's the TV show, but yes, he was a recording artist at the time too.
That he was,
which we tend to remember. How about this? What about East Coast versus West Coast rap and like the big beef, Biggie and Tupac? Yep. Yeah. How does that not make it? I mean, you had rappers that were like laying down diss tracks right and left. You had shootouts and gunfights, and you had like new record labels like Death Row Records that formed, and like all that stuff is going to be big because that was big news. I mean, the death of Biggie and like you remember his funeral scene when they were taking him through I think it was through the Bronx or maybe it was Brooklyn. I think it was the Bronx when like someone started playing Hypnotize as like his like the casket the hearse was going through like and the place like the street was packed and like it just went like it jumped off like the place went crazy and everyone's dancing in the streets and just bumping to his music as like his hearse is driving by. Like that's
crazy.
It's a crazy scene. Like go back and rewatch that news footage of that time. Like it's nuts. So I definitely think you're going to get that, but then you're also going to get, I think we're going to hear names we haven't heard in a while, like Vanilla Ice.
Ooh. Yeah.
Crisscross.
His real name though is, what is it? It's Martin Van Winkle or
oh yeah.
It's like Eugene Van Winkle or something like that.
Yeah.
TLC.
What about Hootie and the Blowfish?
Who has made a resurgence as just a single recording artist. He's actually fairly popular in the country scene. Yeah, Christian and country type of songs. Yeah. Dave Matthews. What about... What about... Can never understand anything he says. She's so bitter, let's go marching down. What about Kid and Play? Was that more 80s? Yeah, that was more like late 80s, I think. 80s, okay. But MC Hammer, please Hammer, don't hurt him. Do you remember Carrie, I forget her last name, from Rick's? She like grew up in MC Hammer's neighborhood, like would go over to his house and like watch movies. Like up in Oakland, yeah. Yeah, like you just have like everybody over. Come on, everybody, there's ice cream. You can't touch this. Do 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 do. You can't touch this. Okay,
what about the boy bands and like the pop
NSYNC.
princesses?
NSYNC. You've got 98 Degrees. You've got New
Backstreet.
Kids on the Block.
Backstreet Boys.
New Kids on the Block was the kind of the first boy band, though, weren't they?
Yeah, but they were also kind of like late 80s. I mean, I know they were still around in the early 90s, yeah, but they were kind of that. And then, of course, the pop princesses, you got Britney Spears and you got Christina Aguilera.
Yeah.
I mean,
and then
those
like
two
some
were-
weird third like stepchild like Mandy Moore, but she was always kind of somewhere out there.
Jessica Simpson, yeah.
Yeah. What about Boys to Men? A B C
Oh,
B B D.
yeah. Now, like Boys to Men and like En Vogue. I mean, like CNC Music Factory. I mean, there's going to be, I would imagine there's going to be a lot of, LL Cool J. Feel
Paula
it.
Abdul.
Ooh, Paula, yes.
Yes.
Straight up now,
Opposites
tell
attract,
me.
and you know, because it ain't fiction. Just
I like how
anytime you can integrate a cartoon in your music video, yes.
I like how you and I both went to different Paula Abdul songs, but it's about the only two Paula Abdul songs anyone's
Right.
going to know. Straight up now, tell me, is it going to be you and me forever? Oh. Or this just a hit and run?
So how is it that a two-hit wonder makes it onto, American Idol and
Because she was also a Laker girl, man. I don't know.
How does that make her an expert? I don't know how that works.
Well, whatever. She did it. So
let me ask one that you probably didn't think of. So what about so this is our coming of age, late 80s, early 90s. What about like models, like girls, like who are the girls of our infatuation? And I'm not talking about like Sycamore High School. I'm talking about like celebrity,
Right, yeah. So like if you're saying like if they do like an
names.
episode on like supermodels and like the fashion industry.
Yeah, I'm saying like
Okay.
Cindy Crawford.
Cindy Crawford, yes, of course. Coming from Illinois and like she grew up in like the hometown adjacent to us. Like
Yeah, that's
Cindy
right.
Crawford is probably going to be the biggest name from the 90s. Kathy Ireland. She was huge in the 90s as well.
Yeah. Christy Brinkley.
Yeah, I mean, she was kind of late 80s into the 90s. Yeah, Christy
Jenny
Brinkley.
McCarthy.
Jenny McCarthy, Pamela Anderson are all going to be big names that are going to, be kind of in the modeling world and whatnot.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, besides like some of the big ones, like I know there's probably plenty of others, like Kate Moss. I remember she was like all over the place for a number of years.
Skinny.
She was like super skinny, like a rail. But that was like if we got to remember the 90s though, there was kind of the term was heroin chic. Like if you didn't look,
Oh God.
do you remember that? Like if you didn't look like you were on heroin, you weren't a model. It's like, what the heck is this?
Oh my gosh, that is the worst coined term I've ever heard in my life.
It's such a aspiring thing for
I
little
want
girls
my
to
clothes
wanna
to
be.
look like they're on the heroin addict.
Right.
That is will sell the clothes.
If the supermodel isn't strung out, she's not going to be able to sell those jeans. It's like, what? No.
Oh gosh.
Okay, so let's jump off the heroin models to
Yes, let's.
sports stories. What do you think are going to be some of the biggest sports stories of the 90s?
How about the Chicago Bulls 6-peat dynasty?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, Michael Jordan and
Scottie Pippen, Dennis
Chicago
Rodman.
Bulls, yeah. 6 rings in 8 years, starting 91 and culminating in 98. I mean, they ruled the decade. So I think any sports episode they do is going to feature that. Here's some other ones I thought of, though. This was big in like 1992. Magic Johnson retiring and
AIDS.
announcing he was HIV positive. Because like
Yes.
that impacted like the NBA, like it ended up changing a rule for the NBA. Like if as soon as any player gets cut and there's blood on the court, like the game stops and that person's got to come out and they got to get cleaned up and patched up and you got to clean up the blood. It's like that,
Right.
that impacted that. So it created a new rule. Plus it was a star like at the height of his career, like retiring. So definitely I think that's going to make it on.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
What else sports wise do you think?
Because
Because I got a few if you want to, if you want some ideas.
I mean, I'm thinking back, like, the steroid, the huge kind of the steroid thing with Jose Canseco and Mark McGuire, the Bat Brothers and
yeah,
Barry Bonds.
that really though didn't come out till like 2003, 2005.
Please.
But of course, obviously, what was going on there. But in the baseball world, I mean, you had the 1994 strike, which really kind of crippled baseball viewership in the 90s, and then of course, like,
and it really took almost a decade to get back. I mean, really, I mean, it's
I mean, like, it was 4 years later in like 1998 when McGuire and Sosa were doing the home run chase for Roger Maris's record. That like that's when people started like paying attention to baseball again,
right?
And so like it took juiced up players cranking the ball deep in order to get people to come back and watch it.
That's America for you.
Of course, also, you had Michael Jordan played baseball for about 18 months when he kind of took a hiatus after the murder of his father. You got the Dream Team. I mean, you got to remember, like, the U.S. lost to Russia in, like, 1988 and got creamed, and, like, that's when we said, okay, no more college kids. We're taking the best of the best. And, like, we beat, like, Latvia, like, 473 to, like, 9 or something like that. I don't remember what it was, but it was... like, we were outscoring teams by like 70 points. It was nuts.
Right.
So
that's interesting. You forget about so much, like the Dream Team. Remember I had like this awesome like shirt with like Christian Laettner on it. And, like,
oh no!
Like,
see, that's the other thing. Like, everyone hates Christian Laettner.
I know.
And he made that shot over Duke in '92 to win the NCAA championship. Christian Laettner. How about this one? And this is a throwback. The infamous Tanya Harding arranges a hit on Nancy Kerrigan.
A literal hit.
Yeah. And she gets a guy to club her with a tire iron at her knee. Like, that was huge news in 1992.
That was huge.
Lilyhammer. Yeah.
Lilyhammer.
Yeah. And of course, Nancy Kerrigan won the silver. So what's up, Tanya Harding? My lace is broke. Do you remember that?
Trash. So white trash.
Okay, and I think probably the last thing I think definitely makes it on there because it was a big news story. I'm going to say the name, and I know you're going to remember this. Buster Douglas.
Oh, biting the ear.
No,
that was Vanderhoof Holyfield. Yeah. That was Vanderhoof Holyfield.
Yeah.
So yeah, Buster Douglas when he fought Tyson?
Yeah, when he knocked Tyson out, was the first guy to ever do that.
Did we watch that at Krago's Pizza?
No,
that was earlier.
Yeah, it was much earlier. It was before he went to prison and before the ear biting but like you got to remember Tyson
tattoo.
and all the weirdness. Tyson was like the man, right? Like he was just like unbeatable. Like he was knocking out everyone, KOing everyone. Like he didn't let it go to decision like ever. And then this like no-namer guy works up through the ranks and KOs Tyson in the 10th. And all of a sudden, everyone knew the name Buster Douglas because his only claim to fame was, knocking out Tyson.
That is true. What about, I'm just thinking about like all these names, like just suddenly kind of like Madonna and like, Anna Nicole Smith and like,
right?
Oh my gosh.
A lot of those names are going to make a comeback. Shania Twain. Cher.
Spice Girls,
right?
Full House.
Yeah, so TV. Let's talk TV. What do you think are going to be some of the biggest shows from the 90s that could show up on an episode of the documentary?
Definitely Full House. In fact, I was watching a movie today, and it had a shot of the Golden Gate Bridge, and everybody in the room was like, Full House! I would say Friends is probably the epitome of the 90s.
Absolutely. I mean, who didn't know like the lyrics to that song? Like, I recall, Steve, when the show came out, like you and me went over to Ryan Bjorn's house, and a few girls from school came over. Like, we watched like Friends like every Thursday night for like the first season over at Ryan Bjorn's house, and everyone's like, "Oh, I'm so like Monica, and you're like Chandler, and you're like Joe." And like everyone had like a sign like who you were in our little group.
Oh,
and as I recall, you were Joey.
I bet I
was Chandler, and you were Joey. And Ryan Bjorn was Ross.
There we go. So funny. So as part of this purge, actually, my wife was going through all these old shirts, and she came across this one that had like Friends across. She's, this is a cute shirt. I'm like, get rid of it.
Please, right?
Like, how long has that been there?
Yeah.
Yeesh. Called a rag.
What about Saved by the Bell?
Oh my gosh. Screech, Mr. Belding. I'm just so scared.
I'm so excited. I'm so scared.
I love the shows that always had to turn PSA on you. You're like, oh no. Yeah,
On a very special Blossom.
That's right. We're going to talk about anorexia.
Seriously, like every time in the 90s, they're like, okay, we need to do some sort of a story with a moral, and we want it to be hard-hitting, and people are going to watch it. So it was always on a very special Fraggle Rock.
Fraggle Rock.
It was
That's
always
awesome.
something like that. What about like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, right?
Love that show.
I mean,
Love
that's
that
how
show.
Will Smith
Carlton?
got his start. Ah,
Yeah, man.
not unusual to be loved by anyone. Hear about this? Da 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 clack clack da 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 da. 90210.
Oh, I was like, what? I know that. Dude, that was like, so I shouldn't have been watching that at my age. Like, I go up to my room, had a TV in my room. I was like, click. I watched a little bit of what's happening with Shannon Doherty and Luke Perry.
Brenda's having an abortion. You're like, what's an abortion? Yeah.
My daughter just asked that today based on the movie we
What?
were watching. Yeah. Saturday's Warrior.
Wow.
The reboot. Oh,
Okay.
yes.
How about this one? Simpsons.
Oh my gosh. Another, okay, so going back to the clean up the closet. So another shirt she pulled out was this one of Homer, and it's a black and white Homer shirt, front and back, and it has him like in a Calvin Klein type, like,
Oh, yeah, I remember that
advertisement.
shirt.
Yeah,
Yeah.
classic one.
Did you keep it? Oh.
No. Yeah.
That one maybe some sentimentality. Okay, what about ER? Like that was a huge show in the 90s.
Yeah, Clooney.
Yep.
Huge.
Twin Peaks.
So I never got into that. I think you did, but I never got into that.
Yep. X-Files obviously was big in the
Yes.
90s. Frasier. I mean, the spinoff from Cheers.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be huge. Quantum Leap. You said Full House. I definitely think Full House is there. Like,
What about America's Funniest Home Videos? That was like the pre-YouTube.
oh yeah,
That was like 30 minutes of people getting hit in the junk.
America, America, this is you. Da 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 da.
Did I ever tell you the time that we submitted a tape to America's Funniest Home Videos?
No, maybe. Yeah,
So-
maybe you did.
Yeah, so it was Easter morn, and my mom was going out to go take care of my grandmother who was sick, but also lived the other side of town by you guys on Brickville Road. And that's right. And she was going out. There was all this traffic on our road. She's like, "What's going on?" She looks beneath the cars, and there is this squirrel that is running around these cars, and it has a Yoplait yogurt cup stuck on its head. So, being the purebred American that she is, she's like, "I gotta get this on video." She runs in, she grabs the camcorder, runs out, and I follow her out. And after 3 failed attempts, I finally yanked this Yoplait yogurt cup off this squirrel's head. It looks at me with strawberry yogurt, covered its face, and then it ran off. It was hilarious.
I do remember you telling me this story. I've seen this video a few times at your house.
Yeah, Bob Saget didn't think it was as funny, apparently.
I recall that show, and there was a lot of videos that weren't that good, but it was the voiceover work that seemed to sell the
yes.
video. So he could have done something with that.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, I think the last category we should kind of make some guesses at technology. Like the 90s was a time when like technology-wise a lot of things were changing and happening. What do you think could show up in the 90s technology?
I would definitely say Microsoft, Windows, like Windows 95. Like that was huge.
Start it up. Remember they had the Rolling Stones as that was their
You
song.
gotta start me up.
Yep.
You gotta start me
Okay, how about this?
up.
The term the World Wide Web. I mean, that started like 1990, and the ability of like people to be connected to the internet. Like, even though like that technology had been around for a long time, like since like the late 60s, it became a household thing in the 90s. I remember getting into AOL chat rooms and like trying to get people to like argue with me and like have fights. And I mean, I may have brought up this Spock Yoda debate even back then.
Oh my gosh. What about like floppy disks, 3x5, disks.
Well, I'd say
the transition from Apple into like mainstream.
I'd say probably more like the transition from floppy disks to CDs. That happened in the 90s. Also, the DVD was invented in the 90s, like 1995. Although it wasn't like a popular medium until like probably like the late 90s, early 2000s. But because I remember I got my first DVD player in like 2000, 2001. But yeah, so like DVDs came out. Remember the Pentium processor? Like all those commercials, like, man, I've got a Pentium in this thing. And like now it's like, yeah, it's like a Pentium 7, it's a i7, who cares? It's like, it's got everything under the hood it needs. Like no one cares about the processor anymore. At least not like that. Like we didn't have commercials trying to sell you on a certain brand of processor.
Exactly.
What about the Human Genome Project, where they started mapping out the entire, DNA? Like that was huge. Like, of course, that's what like helped us get Dolly and the ear on the back of the rat and all that. You remember the Hubble telescope?
Yeah. Yeah, I actually watched. Did I tell you about this? I watched like a Nova presentation on the Hubble. Amazing.
Oh yeah.
Like all the things that it found like a pinprick of space that we'd never seen before, and that opened up like an entire universe of amazing. My nose started bleeding as I'm watching. I'm like, I don't even understand half of this stuff.
Right. Okay, so here's a couple other things I wrote down that technology-wise that happened in the 90s. Like, I'm going to tell you these things and you're going to go, this really happened then? Because it seems so ubiquitous now. USB drives, like USB flash drives, first happened.
Really?
Texting first happened in the 90s. TiVo, the ability to record television, live television, and rewind and fast forward was invented in the late 90s. Voice over internet protocol, the VoIP, which we use now for like, teleconferencing and whatnot for phone lines, came out in the 90s. And then there's this little tiny company that really didn't amount to much that came out in the 90s called Google.
Wow. You think they've been around forever. You just kind of feel like, gosh.
Google is a Generation X company. Like that came out during the 90s. It's, that like pagers were, remember like pagers? Like if you had a pager,
I had a pager, yes.
So did I. It's like, hey man, here's my number. It's like, hey, I'm gonna page this guy. I'm gonna page him 911 so he calls me back right away.
Now I gotta go find a payphone so I can call this guy back from my pager. Did I tell you that I have a pager?
That's exactly right. PlayStation came out in the 90s. I mean, now like video games, like the Sony PlayStation just feels like it's been entrenched, forever, but that came out in the 90s. Just all sorts of like Blackberries, the iMac, Apple's resurgence in the late 90s, after Steve Jobs left the company and then came back and kind of resurrected it, so to speak. Like all these things happened in the 90s. Like we kind of forget that like a lot of technology that we use today like was birthed back then.
It is it was a good time. It was a simpler time, wasn't it?
Well, I mean, yes and no. I mean, you had
fashion, definitely not. My gosh,
right? But I mean,
pants, surf wear at any time,
crisscross, the crossed out colors, and everything was backwards. I mean,
the school portraits with the laser beams behind your head. What's up with that?
Yes, I had a few of those.
Yeah, right. The mullet. Oh my gosh.
I mean, so anyway, like I think it's kind of cool, like just reminiscing about like these things, because I'm curious to see what they're going to put in their, their little documentary mini series about what makes it, and I'm sure there's gonna be some surprises. But like for me, like when I watched the 80s, like that was fun because a lot of that stuff I kind of remembered from like my early childhood years, and the 70s and the 60s I wasn't really alive for, so it was more of like a history lesson. But this one that they're releasing now called the 90s, like for me, that was like junior high and high school and into college. And like, I have very strong memories of like listening to Red Hot Chili Peppers Under the Bridge while I was in shop class, listening to WDEK on the radio and like hearing that song over and over and over and over again in like 1992. Oh, it's so great. But like like that song, when I hear it, it always takes me back to that moment in time. Or like Blind Melon, No Rain.
Yeah.
Like that song, like I know where I was my freshman year in high school every single time I hear that. Like, so this decade that they're going to cover, I have a lot stronger of a tie to, because it was like the decade of like my adolescence and my teen years, when I was becoming a man while I was listening to Boyz II Men.
How fitting.
I knew where the end of the road was, and I knew how to get there on bended knee.
Throw your clothes on them. All the things that we were taught from Boyz II Men.
All the things we were taught from music in the 90s, that as you got a little older and you became an adult, you went, yeah, maybe I should listen to R. Kelly and take any advice from him on anything. Just saying. I believe I can fly.
Woo!
I believe I can touch the sky.
Woo! Woo! I gave you a double woot woot.
I appreciate the double.
My kids still love Space Jam. My kids still love. Anytime they go over to my in-laws' house, they have that movie. They're like, put in Space Jam. I'm like, oh my gosh.
I didn't put movies on here, but can we say like the 90s, like Jerry Maguire, Speed, Pulp Fiction, like movies like I just feel like I saw over and over and over again in high school. Like every single time we go to a party on a Friday night, they're like, hey man, I just rented Speed and Pulp Fiction. Which one do you want to watch? I'm like, I don't care. I've seen it again. I've seen them all. Or what was it with it was the chick flick movie that we used to watch all the time at Melissa Leto's house.
Pretty Woman.
Pretty Woman. Yes.
Pretty Woman. Richard Gere.
Yeah. I've seen that movie
Roberts.
So many times. I don't think I've actually
Prince
seen
of Thieves.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Everything I do it for you. Little Bryan Adams. Oh, yeah.
Oh, man. Yeah. There was a lot of...
Celine Dion, Titanic.
There was a lot of, like, good stuff in the 90s, like, looking back. Like, the movie Mystery Men with Ben Stiller. Like,
all the movies that one?
I love that movie. It's just like a little
where
weird...
like Paul Rodriguez or whatever his name is. What is his name? Pee Wee Herman.
Oh, yeah. Pee Wee Herman.
What's his name?
Paul Rubens.
Paul Rubens, yeah. Isn't he like Fart Man, where you gotta like pull his finger and then there's like like Spatula Man or Waffle Iron Man or something like that, like where he's
the waffler.
The waffler.
Mr. Fury. Yeah. No, like that movie was just like Gene Garofalo was in that too. Yeah, it was just it was a weird. It was a weird kind of quirky movie. But like a lot of 90s movies were like that. Like there was like what's the name?
UHF,
like Reality Bites
Weird
Back.
Al.
Yeah, I mean just a lot of really like kind of weird random things that were like made into movies. Like this sounds like a good movie. And then we got Cabin Boy with Chris Elliott. That was not a good movie.
Fish Stick Kitties.
Yes. So anyway,
very cool. So do you think this should meld into our question of the week for our super friends?
I do. So to our super friends that remember the 90s, lived through it, loved it, or to our super friends who maybe weren't around at that time and want to just get on Wikipedia, we will take those Wikipedia answers as well. Tell us, like, what do you think? Because obviously the show's like just barely started, so it's going to start rolling here pretty quick. But what do you think are some things from the 90s that could make an appearance? Big things, whether it's movies, whether it's music, whether it's news stories or sports stories or TV show or technology or video games or anything that we may be kind of leaving out. Because this was just a little nostalgia trip down memory lane. Let us know what you think could show up, and you can do so on Facebook, facebook.com/FordofNerd, Twitter @FordofNerd, or email, which is fordofnerd@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Yes, and
I second that emotion.
We will read those answers next week. So, Steve, just a reminder, next week, we're going to talk Inception. We're going to do a podcast within a podcast within a podcast. And
push me into some water, I'll wake up. It'll be great.
Yeah, we'll give you a little kick. But Breida will join us. That'll be a good time. And we will just continue rocking and rolling. Once again, Our super friends, thank you for listening and joining us every week. We have a lot of fun doing this, and we appreciate you coming back week after week and sharing some of your time with us nerds.
Absolutely. So with that, may the Force be with you, always.